A fortress. Stone walls 30 feet high. One gate. 500 guards. That fortress burned to the ground. No army approached. No blade was drawn at the throat of anyone who mattered. It fell because of a cup of wine that was pushed away from a dinner table, and the silence that followed it. There is a kind of power the world has always understood. It is loud, it carries a sword, it takes what it wants and leaves evidence of having done so. Most men spend their entire lives either wielding it or running from it. But there is another kind of power, one with no name, because the people who possess it prefer it that way. It does not fight, it simply makes the world arrange itself into the shape it requires, and everyone inside that world believes they chose to be where they are. This is the story of the man who mastered that second kind of power. His name was Hanzo, and in 20 years, he never once needed to draw a sword. Every warlord in the empire knew the name Hanzo, but none had ever seen his face. He was a story told in whispers, a ghost that other ghosts were afraid of. His fee was a small fortune. His results were absolute. In 20 years, he had never once failed a contract. His rivals were craftsmen of death who memorized guard rotations, mastered poison, and studied the angle of every rooftop. They were masters of their trade. They also thought Hanzo was a fraud. He owned no weapons, carried no poison. He was soft-spoken, preferred tea to wine, and spent most of his time at a small table near a window, watching people who did not know they were being watched. "The man is a poet, not a killer," one rival said, laughing. That rival disappeared 6 months later. No one ever found out why. Hanzo had chosen a different instrument entirely, not the body, the mind. The body can be guarded, the mind cannot, and the man who knows how to walk through a mind leaves no footprints behind him. Every fortress, no matter how many guards stood at its walls, was held together by something invisible, the trust between the people inside it. Remove that trust, surgically, quietly, and the fortress did not need to be attacked. It would destroy itself. High in the mountains, where the cold came early and the mist never lifted, stood the domain of Lord Koda. He was not a cruel man. He was something more dangerous, a careful one. The first wall was his guards, 500, in rotating shifts that changed without pattern. One road, one gate. The second wall was his eyes, informants woven through his own household, reporting every whisper to Koda within the hour. The third wall was the one he trusted most, his brother. Lord Ryu had never once in 40 years of life given his brother a reason to doubt him. He tasted every meal. He poured every cup of wine with his own hands. He stood at Koda's right shoulder in every meeting, eyes always scanning. My generals might betray me, my servants might be bought, but Ryu would let them cut off his hands before he let them touch me. He believed it completely. And he was right. Hanzo heard that story 3 months before he accepted the contract. He turned it over, searching for the note that was slightly off. He found it. The stone walls could not be broken. The guard rotation could not be predicted. But trust was a different material entirely. Stone does not lie. Stone does not change based on what someone whispers in the dark. Trust does. Trust is the most brittle thing in the world, dressed up as the strongest. 5 miles from the fortress, Hanzo began his work. He did not buy a weapon. He bought a beggar. The man was paid 3 coins and taught a song, a simple folk tune about a younger brother who grows tired of watching his elder carry a crown too heavy for one head. The beggar sat outside the palace gate every afternoon for 7 days and sang. On the 7th day, the cook found herself humming it in the kitchen, unsure of when she had learned it. It had become part of the air inside the fortress. The second move came from a merchant. "I probably should not say this," he told the head cook, voice low, "but I have seen Lord Ryu late at night near the apothecary the guild expelled 3 years ago." He shrugged. Probably nothing. The cook did not tell anyone, but she thought about it. And the thing about a thought that is not shared is that it grows. By the time it reached Lord Koda, passed through the very informant network he had built to protect himself, it carried a question no one had spoken aloud, but everyone was thinking. What does a man who tastes his brother's food need from someone who makes poison for a living? Koda said nothing. Careful men do not react, they observe. He watched his brother pour the wine at dinner, watched the pause before the taste, watched Ryu's eyes move around the room. Nothing had changed. No lie had been spoken. A question had simply been placed where a certainty used to be. Hanzo did not need to convince Koda that his brother was a traitor. He only needed to make Koda look at his brother differently. The mind would do the rest. The mind always does the rest. Then came the letters, 3 of them. Different wax seals, different messengers, delivered the same evening, an hour apart, to 3 different men. The general of the North learned the general of the South had signed a secret treaty with their enemies. The South learned the North was building a case for his arrest at the harvest ceremony. Koda received nothing. He did not need to. The machine was already running. Hanzo did not invent the ambition in that palace. He had simply given it a direction. Fear does not need to be created. It only needs to be pointed. The 10th night. The dining chamber. Ryu poured the wine, as he had at 10,000 meals before. He tasted it, set the cup before his brother. Koda looked at it. And then, without a word, he pushed it away. It was a small gesture, the kind that means nothing between strangers, but between 2 brothers who had shared 40 years of meals, who had buried their father together, who had stood back to back in battle. It was a verdict. Ryu looked at his brother's face and searched for what he had always found there. He found something else. The face of a man who had already decided. A man who was waiting. "Brother," Ryu began. "I'm tired," Koda said. "Leave me." Ryu sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, thinking about the beggar's song, the one about the younger brother. If Koda already believed him a traitor, if Koda was preparing to move, then the only protection left was to move first. Hanzo had not made Ryu a traitor. He had made Ryu afraid of being accused of being a traitor. And a man afraid to be called a traitor will, in his panic, do exactly what a traitor does. In the North Wing, a general wrote a letter that sounded exactly like the beginning of a conspiracy. In the South Corridor, another told his officers to be ready. The guards could feel it, the way soldiers feel something before they can name it. Nobody knew what was happening. Everyone knew something was. It began at the 3rd hour past midnight, not with an army, but with a question in a corridor, a wrong name given, and then a hand moving, and then everything moving. By the time the sun rose, the Iron Shogunate had ceased to exist. The walls still stood. Every stone was exactly where it had been the night before. But the men who had filled it had destroyed each other from the inside out, for reasons that began with a beggar's song a merchant's whisper, and 3 letters sealed with wax. 5 miles away, the tea house, the same window, the same table. Hanzo watched the smoke rise from the mountain. He finished his tea, paid his bill, nodded to the woman who had refilled his cup for 10 days without asking why, and walked into the forest. No blood on his hands, no sword in his scabbard, no reason in the mind of anyone who survived that night to connect a quiet man at a tea house to what had happened on the mountain. He was not there, and yet nothing would have happened without him. The highest form of power is the kind that leaves no proof it ever was used, the hand that moves without being seen, the decision that feels to everyone who made it like fate. His rivals believed power was about force. The more you brought to bear on a problem, the stronger you were. Hanzo believed the most powerful thing a person could do was make the outcome they wanted feel inevitable. Not engineered, not forced. The only thing that could have happened. A fortress destroyed by force tells one story. Someone came and took this. A fortress destroyed from the inside tells another. It was always going to end this way. The rot was already there. Only Hanzo knew that the rot had been planted, and he was already gone. Hanzo was not a legend of war. He was a legend of architecture, building invisible structures inside the minds of men, then stepping back to watch them collapse exactly as he designed. Those who studied him said watching Hanzo operate was like watching weather form. There was no visible hand, no moment where one could say, "There, that is where he acted." There was only the gathering of conditions and then the storm. History is full of men who won through force and were forgotten the moment a stronger force arrived. But the architects, the ones who moved through systems like weather, did not need to maintain anything. The outcome maintained itself. The people inside it enforced the result, believing all the while that they were acting freely. The sword wins the battle, the invisible hand wins the war, and the war that tears itself apart, the one no one remembers starting, that is the work of the rarest mind of all. Hanzo sat at his tea house for 10 days. He did not rush, he did not force, he did not fight. He simply made the fortress believe its own story, and the fortress did the rest. The strongest structures in the world are not held together by stone or steel. They are held together by the shared belief of the people inside them. Remove that belief quietly, precisely, without ever touching the stone, and the structure does not need an enemy. It becomes its own. We tell ourselves the world is run by the loudest voice in the room, that power lives in titles, bank balances, the thickness of a fortress wall. But Hanzo understood something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. The world is moved by what is never said. The dagger isn't steel. The dagger is the moment a colleague stops CCing you on emails. The subtle shift in a partner's eyes from certainty to questions. The silence in a boardroom that outweighs every word spoken inside it. You aren't here because you want a legend. You're here because you've already felt it. That note, slightly off key. The weather shifting before anyone named the storm. You sensed it, but you didn't have the language for what you were seeing. That changes now. This is Vantage. Welcome to the terrain.